guys, it's Reese. So this is for our small group looking at cartilage and bone. This one's just gonna be on cartilage. We're looking at 3 different kinds of cartilage: so hyaline cartilage, fibrocartilage, and elastic cartilage. Those are the 3 types of cartilage we're gonna be looking at. So what is cartilage? It's going to be a tough and durable avascular connective tissue. Tough and durable. So if we think about our connective tissues we talked about before, right? We had our ECM, so our extracellular matrix, and it was kind of loosey-goosey, right? We looked at that loose connective tissue where we had not many cells, and we had a lot of cells and we had just like a couple little collagen fibers. Now we're looking at something that is tough and durable, and it's avascular, meaning that it doesn't have our blood supply, right? It doesn't have any nerve supply. What this means is that the endoplasmic, the extracellular matrix is going to be firm but somewhat pliable. It's going to allow tissues to bear mechanical stresses. So the cells in cartilage is called chondrocytes. So our chondrocytes are going to be the cells of this area. So realize that in our other connective tissue we talked about, we said that there are all of those different types of permanent and wandering cells, right? But with this one, we're just going to have one type of cell. The only type of cell that we're going to find is our chondrocytes themselves. So in relation to this, I want to look at what's happening or what's the difference in our actual extracellular matrix and what are we finding here. So like I said before, we are avascular. We're going to have no nerve or blood vessel supplied to this area. And in our extracellular matrix, we're going to find a whole lot of GAGs and type 2 collagen. So if you remember the MyCRIBS acronym, right? M, most type 1. And then the C was for cartilage, and that's type 2. So remembering, type 2 collagen is found within cartilage. We're going to have a whole lot of GAGs. Why is this important? This tissue allows a lot of diffusion to happen so that there can be diffusion of the substance between blood vessels and the surrounding connective tissues and the chondrocytes in the matrix. So even though they're avascular, there still can be some type of diffusion there. So chondrocytes are synthesized and they kind of maintain and create all of this ECM. So as you can see with this picture, chondrocytes, because we have this firm, tough, durable ECM, like it's firm, we need to actually have a little house. I like to call it the hobbit hole for the chondrocyte, okay? This little hole that you can see here, this is called the lacunae. These lacunae are cavities that are found within the ECM. So I just want you to understand those components. So when you see the word lacunae, it is a hole where a cell lives. We're going to see other lacunae throughout this class, throughout cell and tissue biology. But when relating to cartilage, the lacunae are the hobbit holes for the chondrocytes. Chondrocytes, the only cells in cartilage. So cartilage, if we're turning, what is its function? It's a key tissue in the development of the fetal skeleton and most growing bones. So we think about cartilage, think about like our growth plates. Think about the cartilage in your ear. Think about in your ribs. This is all different. In your intervertebral discs, this is all different types of cartilage. It's a key tissue for development in the fetal skeleton, and when I think of it, I think about our different layers that we talked about before, so our mesoderm and our endoderm and our ectoderm, right, in our embryology. Specifically, cartilage is also going to be part of that mesoderm area, so that mesenchyme formation. Right here, I'm showing you kind of like one area to think about is in long bone, and we're looking at our growth plates. So cartilage is an area where we can begin to build our bone, which is bone is going to be the next topic we're talking about. But it's going to be an area where we can have different types of growth. And when I'm saying growth, I'm meaning an expansion of cartilage tissue, more chondrocytes. How are we going to get more chondrocytes? And hyaline cartilage, which is going to be a type of cartilage we're going to talk about, is actually going to become bone when we think about growth plates in general. There is this sheath of dense irregular connective tissue that surrounds cartilage in most places, except for a few exceptions, which I'll talk about in a second. But this is called the perichondrium, and the perichondrium contains blood vessels that serve the cartilage and has some small neural component. So again, cartilage itself is avascular, but this perichondrium is not avascular. Okay, so it's kind of like the little vascular coat that's the cartilage has on. Again, there are 3 types of cartilage that we're going to be looking at: hyaline cartilage, elastic cartilage, and fibrocartilage. We're going to start by talking about hyaline cartilage. Hyaline cartilage is going to be our most common type of cartilage. We're going to find this in our articular surface of our movable joints. We're going to find it in the walls of our large respiratory passages, such as our nose, our larynx, our trachea, our bronchi. It's going to be the ventral ends of our ribs where they articulate with the sternum. These are known as our costal cartilages. It's going to be in the epiphyseal plates of long bones. So that's going to be what creates longitudinal bone growth. Epiphyseal plates are going to be our growth plates, so what I drew earlier. And then in the embryo, hyaline cartilage is what forms our skeleton. That is then gradually replaced as bone. So basically a baby, an embryo, is just a whole, instead of a bag of bones, it's a bag of cartilage, specifically hyaline cartilage. Now, relating again to like a question that she would ask on an exam, or how you would differentiate, or what would be something that signifies that, oh, I'm looking at hyaline cartilage, is that it's distinguished by its homogeneous, amorphous, extracellular matrix. You're like, what the heck does that mean? Basically, it's a super hydrated gel. So this is kind of like, if you think about like the musical Grease, that gel that they put, that oily stuff they put in their hair, that's the consistency of our ECM here. Okay, it's this firm but pliable, kind of like silly putty feeling. And then again, within it, we have our chondrocytes. These are our mature cartilage cells, and they're found within our little hobbit hole lacunae. The ECM is produced and maintained by our chondrocytes, and there are 3 major molecules found in our extracellular matrix. The first one we're going to talk about is our collagen. So that's our major matrix protein. Again, like I said before, this is going to be our type 2 collagen, and it's going to make a bulk of this, again, from my crib, right? Most common is type 1, cartilage type 2, then reticular is going to be type 3, and then the 4th is going to be for our basement membrane. The next is our proteoglycans. If you remember those, that's going to be our ground substance that contains 3 main gags. It's going to be where we have those covalent bonds along with our like middle core protein. The 3 gags that we see are hyaluron, chondroitin sulfate, and keratin sulfate. Again, the sulfates, they're salty. They're going to diffuse into it. This is going to make our lubricating and our space-filling agents. Think about, when you think of protoglycans, I think about my core protein having covalent bonds, right, with my gags. So that's my little drawing there that I always make for him. Then our 3rd type of class of molecule within our ECM is going to be those multi-adhesive glycoproteins. These are going to influence the interactions between the chondrocytes and the matrix molecules. So it's kind of just like the little hamburgers that get things going, right? They're the signals, they're the text messages that you get between the cells and the matrix. I'm now going to talk kind of about the distribution of hyaline cartilage. So there's like this specific pattern of how it's distributed and the different ways that you can actually have cartilage grow. So there's 2 different types of growth. I have interstitial growth, and I'm going to have apoppositional growth. I'm going to first talk about interstitial growth. So here I see like these flower type things. These are going to be called exogenous groups. They're basically a group full of chondrocytes that have recently divided, and they're going to continue to divide. And you can have things grow that way. So they're growing from within the cartilage proper. They're growing from within, and they can kind of multiply. Kind of think of like a closed-knit community, and you just keep having people have babies, but they're all still within that same community. So the town may grow, but that's not going to make like the entire state grow. It's just going to make the town grow, right? When I think about this, around these isogynous groups, I'm going to have this deep staining area. This is called my territorial matrix. So think about it. You have this group of people that are growing, and now they're going to put up a big-ass fence because they don't want people coming in. In this area, we're going to find more gags. Why would you want more gags? The gags are going to help with the growth of these newfound chondrocytes. The lighter area where we don't have a lot of chondrocytes is going to call it the interterritorial area. It's just light staining, and it's just known as the space between these groups. Think about the pericardium. So the pericardium, we talked about earlier, was that sheath of dense, irregular connective tissue that surrounds the cartilage, and is going to be where we find the actual like vasculature, because again, cartilage itself is avascular, but the pericardium is not cartilage, it just surrounds the cartilage. The perichondrium is divided into two different layers, an outer and an inner layer. And it's through these layers that we can also have growth of our cartilage tissue. So our outer layer is going to be called our fibrous layer. It's going to have type 1 collagen and fibroblasts. Again, fibroblasts, if we think back to it, are like, oh, I immediately think connective tissue, fibroblasts, the most common cell, that's going to differentiate and make ECM, right? Well, one thing that it makes, fibroblasts can be differentiated or changed into, that's what that means, changed into chondroblasts. So our second layer, our inner layer, so the layer closest to our cartilage proper, is called chondrogenic layer. Chondro, meaning that it's now it is the beginner of the cartilage tissue or the making of chondrocytes. Chondroblasts are going to be that first step. Blasts are kind of like the babies, and they haven't yet been differentiated and are like, yes, I am a mature chondrocyte, but they sure as golly are going to get there and get right into that cartilage and become chondrocytes themselves. Again, the perichondrium does contain blood vessels and capillaries that allow diffusion of oxygen and nutrients into that cartilage proper. All hyaline cartilage has perichondrium except for the articular surface of our joints. So these are going to be the areas that cover the ends of our bones of our movable joints, and they lack perichondrium so that they don't actually have that diffusion, because the diffusion is coming from the synovial fluid that they have there. A lot of words that I just said. Essentially just know that my hyaline cartilage has perichondrium except for articular surfaces of we had two different types joints. Of growth. So the isogynous groups, where I'm having those divisions of the chondrocytes within the cartilage, that's called interstitial growth. Whereas we have something going from maturation from the perichondrium, so going from a fibroblast to a chondroblast to a chondrocyte, this is called apoppositional growth. Now, let's take a look at our second type of cartilage that we're going to be talking about today. This is going to be fibrocartilage. This is going to be a combination of our dense connective tissue that we talked about earlier, and a mixture of the hyaline cartilage that we literally just talked about. This is located where there's resistance needed for both compression and shearing forces. So compression, pushing in, and shearing, kind of moving back and forth. Areas you can think about this would be in like intervertebral discs, in our temporomandibular and sternoclavicular joints, in the meniscus of our knees, right? Our knees are buckling and bellowing and dealing with different pressures, in our pubic symphysis, in the pelvic, and as well as attachments for certain ligaments. When I think about fibrocartilage, I think about a certain histological pattern called herringbone. Herringbone, thinking about like in a fish. And so it kind of has this appearance of a V. So if we look at this picture right here over in the corner, you can see that it has this kind of like V marcation that we see. This herringbone pattern is going to be accompanied with having an area where the ECM has both type 1 collagen, the fibroblasts, as well as type 2 collagen, the chondroblasts. There is no perichondrium when it comes to fibrocartilage. Okay guys, so our last type of cartilage we're going to talk about is going to be elastic cartilage. Think about an elastic band, right? You can bend it and move it. This is because it has elastic fibers. So elastic cartilage is going to also have our type 2 collagen fibrils that we find in all of our cartilage tissues, but it's also going to have our elastic fibers. It's not homogeneous, meaning that it has these elastic fibers that kind of give it this less watery, less silly putty-like material, but it is flexible. You can see this in your ear and in the tubes of our inner ear, as well as in our epiglottis. Elastic cartilage is surrounded by perichondrium, so it's going to have appositional maturation and growth. The lacunae appear larger and more tightly packed when you look here, and you can't really tell where there are groups of isogenous groups of growth. So the main takeaway I want you guys to have here is that we're going to apoppositional growth when it comes to elastic cartilage, hyaline cartilage, and with fibrocartilage, you're only going to have that interstitial growth.